Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I am a volunteer fire department at Station 12. Today I will be here discussing the concepts of fire protection and prevention with the council here. Our goal today is to go over all the things that we can do to help prevent fires associated with new buildings and construction, current and buildings that we have going on, or any new buildings, new permits that are going to be provided for buildings that will be coming up. What I want to discuss over is the means and method we do this with the city council, so you'll have a better understanding of how we prevent fires and keep people safe. So I'm going to start off today by the basic concepts of education. Education is with fire code should stem from an understanding of local municipal rules and guidelines, as well as NFPA 70E standards such as the 101, 72, and 70E of NFPA. Also knowing building code standards such as NEC for electricians. Basic concepts of enforcement. Enforcement to building code is monitored through entities such as OSHA, local inspectors, fire marshals, etc. If any issues were to be found and work could be stopped on new construction, fines could be handed out to buildings currently in service, failing permits for new buildings coming up, or buildings and constructions that are being done. Basic concepts of engineering associated with fire prevention. When buildings are conceptualized, engineers create drawings that meet requirements for construction. Once the design is made, all parts and assembled to the final work must be in design method and assured by the companies such as UL Listings. It also must meet the building and site specific codes as well. So whenever we're talking about all of this, we want to make sure that we understand, starting off, that this is how we do things with fire prevention and protection. It all starts with understanding where we need to be at, implementing those practices with all those associated and all those who have a stake in this, and then engineering as far as what we can use and how we can use it, such as fire protection systems, fire alarm systems, and signage for means of access and egress. Everything that we are going to cover today is going to go over how we do things as a constructability management process, as well as going over how we tie that into fire code. Code in the jurisdiction is done by the city and or county, either the AHJ or a specific portion of the building. Like if you have your AHJ who's over mechanical or electrical, whatever that may be, making sure those are associated with that AHJ. Or in fire walks with the fire marshal. So on our final building code inspections for our TCO and CO, the fire marshal for this county and or region has to go over all the specifics with the fire code. So if there's exit signs that are not in place, if there is not enough protection on flow systems such as air conditions, not having monitors on those like duct detectors, tamper flows on your water coming in for your sprinkler riser systems, and how your system works and functions as a test purpose. So usually per our area, the city is a lot more stringent, has a lot more codes because of more area things that go on around there, such as other buildings, more people in those areas visiting those areas as they come into the city. In my jurisdiction, it's ingrained in every aspect of the building, starting with the grounding and lightning prevention, bonding and fire rated wall inspections, kitchen equipment and fire suppression system inspections. Even in the electrical walks with the fire marshal, we get buy-in to ensure that signage is in the correct location and everything is acceptable. Our local code creation is created by the fire marshal, AHJs, and of course you as the city council. So hopefully, again, that all we're going over today helps the city council here make a better decision on upcoming construction, its ratings, and what is required to keep everybody safe who is going to be occupying those facilities. So as city council members, going over all of this stuff, it's a lot of details that we're going to have to go over, and you can see all the notes on this. Statistics say, if you have a poor standard of what your practices are, you're going to have a higher increase of fire risk. That is the standard for any practice and procedure as of general. The less there is, the more there is the opportunity. So what we want to do is, again, by this meeting, that we want to make sure that we're communicating what we're looking at and what we would ask that y'all consider whenever you're making these fire codes. Fire ratings are dependent on testing and the ASTM standards, as well as UL processes, i.e. after flame, decomposition, fire resistance, spread, and reaction. So these are all characteristics of a fire that they would apply to different materials that we would be using in these buildings to ensure that they have a certain fire rating, such as sheetrock, fire rated caulk, sleeves and stuff that go in between floors. Want to make sure that all of this is rated to do its job and is safe for the individuals and does its job to keep those individuals safe for as long as possible to meet its rating. Fire testing is in one area versus another is very different. So for say, if you are from the warm desert climates versus the moist, warm southern climates, there would be two very different means and methods of how you would have to do things. So in your higher moisture areas, such as the south, with a lot of humidity and a lot of rain, that is something you would want to make sure that you have a lot more water protection prevention means to keep water out of like electrical components or other components that could create a fire if water was introduced, like a vent for a grease stove, or so you don't have a grease fire. Excuse me. Other materials will have to have temperature effects, such as if you're in the hot desert or a hotter climate, you wouldn't want to run a non-rated cable through an attic. So AHJs can specify whether something's going to meet the standard. It's also the engineering and listing behind that. So you want to make sure whatever you're using for these buildings has the correct code. So in the areas that have a lot more thermal aspects, you would want to make sure that is accounted for. For instance, you wouldn't want to run a non-rated cable through an underground system and it not be rated for the moisture, or run a regular non-rated cable through an attic and it become too hot and heat up and melt. So that is something that you would want to consider whenever you're doing these processes. Characteristics of an unsafe structure that we have in some of our areas. Some of the things I have seen, it can be very vast based on which structure is being built and when it was being built. Some structures still have out-of-date wiring that doesn't have to be updated until it is worked on. So older structures with like knob and tube wiring, or a jacketed wiring with a fiber compound jacket, may not have the same rating as a normal or a newer cord with the fire resistant powder that's in the newer Romex. So that is something to consider, as well as protection means in such places as an attic. You would want to make sure you have grading on all your entryways, all your eaves to make sure that rodents and stuff doesn't get in there and attack that wiring and cause a fire hazard there. Other buildings that have limited escape means that weren't required in that time frame would be something that you want to make sure that we're looking out for. Areas without signage. So some buildings haven't been looked at in a while. They may have had their signage removed or taken down. Without proper protection means such as alert systems like a fire alarm system, or bollards that aren't in place in front of like a gas meter, something along those lines that would prevent a leak of gas or any other means that would be a flammable material. Also, buildings that are missing fire alarm or fire extinguishers. Ones that haven't been inspected in quite a while. That's one that we get a lot. Is you'll walk into a building and the fire extinguisher won't be inspected. So it's establishing standards for those fire extinguisher inspections. I would say that some of the areas that we had to watch out for in our area that you would want to make sure that specific standards are in place for are areas like nuke plants or nuclear power plants, chemical plants, such as your chemical manufacturing processes, things like that. Wood processing facilities like pallet mills, sawmills, or wood chip mills. Feed and fertilizer manufacturer companies, such as cat food plant or any kind of food processing plant. Pharmaceutical plants, places where they're introducing a lot of chemicals and gas into one area to make new pharmaceutical drugs. Data centers and steel mills. So in my area, the most, or in most areas as well, whenever you're designing a building and you're describing the processes of how to build that with engineering, you want to make sure that it's being done so to help create a fire barrier between different floors in areas with fire rated walls, such as stairways, elevator shafts, electrical rooms, and chases between floors. You want to make sure all holes are caulked and sealed to meet the same fire rating, so you prevent the spread of fire in between floors and in between areas where people have to access and egress to keep those people safe as long as possible. Also engineering on stuff like this is like putting kitchens and chemical areas and more high flammable areas towards the outside of the building, where it is more accessible for firefighters to enter, and having signage for those areas so firefighters know what they're going to run into whenever they run in a building, so you don't have a situation where you have a bunch of chemical in one building. A firefighter runs in to go and try to fight the fire, opens a door, or goes into an area that has a flammable chemical that is highly combustible and creates a situation where the firefighter and or others gets hurt because of that situation. So going over all of this, I want it to be an educational experience. Is there any part of this process and procedures that you would like more questions on, or would have more questions on, so we can go over certain things? I would say that if we got a building that hasn't been inspected in a while, or is an older construction, it's probably something that we could set a standard on to have it so many years check to see if everything's up to date. So there was another one that I had, like you were talking about. There's an area around the lake here that is actually in city code versus county code. As we talked about earlier, city code versus county code can be different. So you have to have monitoring for electrical in the water as a life safety means, and that has to be able to shunt trip or shut off the power going to that boat dock. So that is a different practice that we use, and I believe one of the senators was a big process in that because of a fatality in their family. So stuff like that is what we want to look out for. Having our evac routes for the nuclear power plants in our area, you know, processes for if steel runs out of a building, that would be a good one to start setting standards for. The AHJs that are in the area, I know there's very few. There's probably a few of them in this meeting here. You know, they may have more answers on certain constructability items that we would be looking for. Like you said in your question there, how would we create a big list of those items that would be banned or the ones that would be good? I would say that we would lend to AHJs and maybe even get involvement from local construction companies in the area to give us their expert opinions on things like that. Any more questions? How many access routes do we need in each building? All right, so the typical standard is 2. You want to make sure that if there's any way that people can get in or need to get in and out of the building, that those areas are maintained in per life safety code. There are OSHA standards on that, as well as NFPA 70 or EPA standards as well. So we want to make sure that any of those areas are covered by the standards associated. And again, that's where the fire marshal here in this area would cover that and let us know. Your AHJs as well, whenever they're doing design, whenever they're getting the original drawings to do the design for the building, something they would look over as well. Fire suppression system on the outside of a building. That's not something we have to worry about specifically since we're in the South. There's a lot of moisture in the air. There's typically not something that you see. I have seen it on certain buildings where they spec'd it out to have certain fire protection systems on the outside of the building, especially like if you got a catwalk or an eave or something like that. I have seen those kind of situations on the outside, but it really just depends on the area. Like some areas in California and Arizona may have more outside protection for like sprinkler systems. Well, if no one else has any comments, questions, concerns with what we've discussed today, I hope that everyone got a lot out of this and we make better decisions moving forward as a team and as a community to work towards the safety of all individuals when it comes to fire protection and prevention. Please reach out to us if you have any other questions, comments, or concerns. Thank you. Have a nice day.